Recording in progress.
Thank you, everybody. We are back here again discussing our labour exposure drafts. We have approved 2 of them. We have 2 more to consider. I'm going to hand over now to Natalia and Harold, who have been working on them, to take us through comments that the GSSB members have made on the draft exposure drafts prior to the meeting and the staff responses.
Thank you, Carol. So now I'm going to present the comments received for forced labor and child labor. I can say that these 2 drafts were developed in a kind of consistent way that was suggested by our TC and AG. So moving on to the next slide, I will for forced labor. So we received 14 comments. The majority of the comments were content related and 2 editorial ones. Most can be implemented prior the public consultation. And for some, we reply to you in case we consider them along the PCP feedback. Moving on. Thanks again for your comments. I know we are 4 drafts to review, so thanks again. The first comments that we received for this, a group of comments, were for this for forced labor and child labor, proposing a change in the title of 2 disclosures. The title was policies and risk assessments for the organization activities, and the similar title, policies and risk assessment for business relationship. We discussed this point with the technical and the editorial team, and we suggest on how to address this comment from the GSSB member is to propose a change in the title where we are removing the word risks for avoiding any possible misinterpretation of the scope of the intent of the disclosures. Additionally, we are proposing to define what does it mean risks for the disclosure. As you can see in the slide, that is the proposal that we will add this new text, and we are using one of the international and authoritative instruments in due diligence. So we want to address these comments, implementing these 2 changes in the draft. I don't know if there are any comments or questions on this.
Anna Nefed over here. Just a quick clarification. So the risk would be removed from the titles, but then retained in the body of the disclosures with the definition of what type of risk. Is that correct, Natalia? I'm just
correct.
clarifying.
So we're going to remove the word risks in the titles, but as this topic, child labor, forced labor, are quite connected with human rights, due diligence, expectation, and it's a word that is kind of natural for practitioners that are involved in assessing these risks, this topic, and the use of risks. So it's still in the disclosure. And something also that I would like to know, that we are already using the word risks in the current GRI child labor and forced labor standards. So something new that we are bringing in these updated standards.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, because I did raise that use of the word risk. Can I ask whether there are alternatives to using that in the body of the standard? Is there another way of describing it, or is this the way that's accepted in this field? Perhaps Anne or Susanna have some insights here as well. Hello.
Sorry. Very happy to jump in. I was just thinking, I was reading the answer from the standards team and the text inserted So I think, to my mind, making the link with the OECD due diligence guidance on responsible business conduct seems a sensible one. Yeah, was my first reaction.
And I can add some, this was heavily discussed with the AG and with the TC, because initially we said that we spread the concern that we want to use maybe another terminology, and we say, okay, potential impacts, but yeah, it come again that the best way as sustainability practitioners are the one that are implementing or observing these social impacts on the ground is like a natural language to understand, like child labor risks, for labor risks, and we are also using the word assessment. So I think it's favorable to keep in the title assessment, because we are also using it in the universal standard, in other like labor related standard, occupational health and safety. So it's like overall it's a terminology that the practitioners in the field will like easily like understand what is the expectation of the standard.
Okay, so practitioners in the field, but the people using our standard knowledge and not deep knowledge perhaps on any particular area. And within organizations, within companies, risk is a big topic, and risk to the governing body is about risks to the organization. So maybe as you go through the PCP process, maybe it's worth just keeping in mind whether there are other terms. There may not be. We may come back to this, but just to flag that up, that whilst clearly it's a term that people in the field understand in a particular way, within organizations it's understood in a different way.
We use screening. We use screening. Yeah.
I think that's from the team. I'm sorry.
Susanna here. I just wonder, also due diligence term originated not as a human rights due diligence, right? So now we understand that human rights due diligence is broadly, I think, understood. Human rights risks, for me, also feel already sort of in the public domain. So, but I also understand the the concerns behind this. But I just wanted to make this comment.
I propose, from the team, we can propose like tests, because this is just for the disclosure or the standards. So first have the management section of child labor and forced labor. Then there is one that is related for risk assessments of evaluating like the potential impact of child labor for the organization, and the structure that after that, so the organization will report their like the actual impacts in terms of incidents. So it's like the flow of the standard also, like it show like a due diligence approach. So first identifying like risks, and then identifying like or reporting the incidents. What we can do is also like test these titles or approach of these disclosures that refer to that in the workshops and in the webinars, and even it could be like as part of a new question if you think it's necessary in the PCP questionnaire.
I think for the Charles, sorry, speaking. In this context of forced labor and human rights, I think using the word risk right away has ambiguity, because you already put it as a negative aspect. But I think there was also either a risk evaluation or assessment, which you kind of mentioned, assessment of activity, or I would agree, like Susanna just mentioned, human rights risk per se, it's a bit tricky to understand, but you have to assess the risk of human rights and also specify, like you did in your sentence, but it's kind of still ambiguous to say it's not about the organization risk. In some way, it kind of is. But I think this word, it has to be more carefully found. I like assessment, because you have to first evaluate first. To put risk already, you're already saying that okay, this is negative. I think more objectively, you can assess based on some regulation like modern slavery, whether they violated that, and then there is risk, consequence. I think. Just my view.
If I may, Anna Nefedova, to me, actually, this sounds like we're using the risk in a pure sense of what risk means in everyday life. And I think GRI has struggled with it over the years, where we take a word, make something out of it, like a topic, and then say, right, you cannot use the word topic because it's reserved for special purposes. Hard to do it with risk because it's an important word. And if we use it in terms of like the corporate ERF, like enterprise risks, that's okay. But I feel like we should still be able to use the word risk, which it seems like linguistically, that's what we're trying to do.
Nicely put. Let's keep that on the agenda. Deborah.
I mean, I was just thinking about it, like if risk is the problematic word, I mean, is it likelihood or probability? I mean, going back to the pure sense of how people might solve risk, right? So we're trying to understand where there might be higher incidences of this, especially in business relationships. It's not a risk for the organization, but there's a risk that this is happening.
Yeah. Let's leave it with the team to think about as we go through the PC agreement anyway, but just to keep that in mind and maybe just sound the technical working group out on that one as well. Thank you. I'll let you go on.
Okay. Thank you all. Some GSSB members like comment on, in addition to adding some additional examples for risks of forced labor, for root causes of the action that can be implemented to address root causes of forced labor, new examples and ideas to add in the guidance text for remediation actions that the organizations can take. So we are going to incorporate those additional examples in the draft before they go to PCP. And yeah, that will be sure we're going to incorporate those. So, I don't know, questions or comments, because those were like the key points that were raised in forced labor standard draft. Next slide.
Okay, thank you very much. So we come to the point where we decide whether we approve this exposure draft, presumably again subject to the proviso before around the PCP questions being looked at again. Is everybody happy to approve this exposure draft? Yes. Yes, unanimous again. Thank you.
Thanks again. Now the last standard for the labor-related topics. It's child labor. For this one, we received 8 comments from the GSSB. Thanks again. All of them were content-related comments, and most can be implemented prior to the public consultation. Next slide, please. Again, as I say, because as these two forced labor and child labor are developed in a kind of same approach, so we're going to probably include the question as well for child labor about the title and the proposal of new text. So going on to the next slide, please. We receive a comment to change to like put the disclosure of incidents of child labor in business relationship like a little bit like higher in the order of the draft. The team reviewed this with the technical team, and our proposal is that we keep the same structure following GRI, like general structure, architecture, and the writing style, in particular because there are 2 reasons. The first one is that for GRI, all disclosures have the same level of importance. So it doesn't mean because it's the last disclosure or the first disclosure have different, so all of them have the same importance. So and the second reason is that the standard like follows like a natural like flow of reporting. First, organization report the policies and the actions to identify and assess impacts on child labor. Then they identify and assess the activities and the business relationship at higher risks of the topic, and then they report the incidents for their activities and the incidents in business relationships. So it's also structured in a way that kind of a step-by-step implementation of the due diligence in this particular topic. And I don't know, maybe can explain the second comment and open for questions. So the second group of comments were related about the reporting burden that we already discussed, I think, for the previous drafts. But again, I want to bring in, because there were several comments from the GSSB members on this topic. What I can bring to the table is that the TC acknowledged that, for instance, child labor is a really complex topic in supply chain that is difficult sometimes to identify, even reporting on that, but it still is necessary as having like disclosure that facilitate or become like a tool for organization to identify and to report what they are doing on this topic, how they are engaging with the business relationship, how their process to identify on child labor. So they acknowledge it's complex, but yeah, it's a way to go beyond only to policies and commitment, but organization will have the standard as a tool to report how they are really addressing and implementing action, for instance, with other organizations, with industry organizations, or a local level for addressing child labor impacts. And yeah, that is like the two. I don't know, any comments or questions?
We'll test it in the PCP.
Yeah, and again, yeah, we are going to like test the full standard with open question during the PCP. Next slide. I don't know if there are comments.
No questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we get to the approval point. Can we approve this exposure draft on the same basis as the previous three?
Yes.
Yes, again unanimous. Thank you very much, Natalia.
Sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your valuable comments and reflections on the drafts. And the last piece, now that the standards are approved, we are planning to run the PCP. We hope that we start the PCP on the 10th of December, and it's going to be a nice PCP starting day, because it's the International Human Rights Day. So we are planning to launch during that day. Initially, we thought 1st of December, but then we thought it was better to wait 10 days for this amazing PCP starting day, and running until the 9th of March, giving possibility, because it's going between holiday season, so for Latin America, for other regions, so and from Europe. Yeah.
Thank you. Does that start date mean that the PCP questions that we talked about need to be circulated and agreed by circulation? We can do that, can't we?
If that's possible.
If that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a summary that needs to be approved by the GSB, and we have the questions, and both need to be circulated and ideally approved in writing before the next meeting in December. But I think tomorrow, when we summarize the actions for staff and put a timeline to it, we can come back when we would need the feedback on the questionnaire. Yeah?
We can do that. Thank you, Bastian. And Rebecca has a question.
Yes, thank you. I have a question regarding the webinars and the translation into Spanish and Portuguese. Will you be adding translation into other languages? Why only Spanish and Portuguese? Which is great, but not criticizing, but trying to amplify that to other regions of the world.
Yeah, we have this approach for the other PCP, try to collect feedback from the Latin region in particular, and in alignment with the network there. So that was the proposal to, like, if they basically was to reach like stakeholders from that region and get involved in the discussion and the feedback for that region.
I'm bringing this up because from an investor perspective, we usually have trouble engaging with companies on workers' rights and forced labor in the Asia Pac region. So my suggestion would be to include other languages as well.
So we're talking here about the 2 formal global webinars,
Yes.
as we call them. So try to have all the regions, and next to that, like we just received a request from South Africa, to do one. But also already Tomo explained that he also did several ones in Japanese.
Okay.
So next to that, we would love to, with all the remarks Bastian gave earlier, within the capacity we have, we will try to reach as much as possible people with translations, but we need also your help and your network in Asia next to our own offices. That's the way we do that.
Well,
So we will reach thousands of people, and we try to engage.
Maybe Yan Dong and Dr. Guo
Absolutely.
Young and
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Okay,
So-
thank you. I just wanted to, now that we finished this now, have we? No. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Charles, just a technical pen, which is okay, you chose it symbolically. You announce the PCP on that date, or you announce that it will start on December 10th earlier?
We start the PCP and do like the PR that day, like
The announcement on
the
December 10th,
announcement is
so
go
nothing
to
before that?
no.
Okay, thank you.
So the press release or
The
the
press
message
release,
from
the
our
message from the
communication
communication
goes
goes
out. Yeah.
that day, and all the PCP questionnaires go online that day.
Thank you. So my question was, when all this work started, I don't think any of the people on the GSSB now were involved in the initial approval of this work stream, which is not to say we undo what's been done. We don't do that. We don't go backwards. But I wonder whether it might help members if we had, now that we know what the disclosures are, if we had a summary across all of the labour standards so that we could look across and see what disclosures are where, just to do our job in assessing that they're a sensible, coherent package. One thing that I have mentioned before is that every time an organisation picks up a different standard, it's just more work in downloading it and reading it, working out which bits are the same in every standard and which bits are new to a particular standard and so on. So I just thought it might be worth us here, given that we're new to it, looking across with the disclosures. I don't know, is that likely to be helpful?
I think we're happy to do that.
do it,
One
of
thing maybe is good to know that because we came to, indeed it's a long process with 11 standards, so also with the team of Laura, we discussed actually also with SEMP, our standards editorial and technical team, that we need to do some coherence work to align, make sure it's a fully comprehensive set. So towards the final standards. So that's something we will also discuss with the DC. So it's about language, terminology, whatever is, because the first standard we produced, we now know things we said we want to have it a little bit different in the first one. So this is one thing we do, and we can make the summarization for sure for the GSB. That's not a problem.
Thank you. Could we have that on the action list then, please? Anne?
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks very much. I think, that cross, and I think it's not just a question of with the other labour standards. I just remember some of the discussions back in the day around the economic impact. Some of the questions about the business model were, oh, well, that's going to be covered in business relationships. So I think it's good to come back and revisit. So that was the first point. And then just, I think the second point, so we might not have been here when it was all initiated, but I think it is really impressive to see how much work has been done on this kind of review process. So please, thanks very much to you guys, but also to the technical committee. I think it'd be really helpful to to acknowledge that and say, yeah, obviously we've got to go through the exposure process, but there's such a lot of work that's been done here. So, we really appreciate that.
Thank you very much for that, Anne. And I actually think looking across the economic impact standards, probably at the same time, doing the look across together, because there's quite a lot of those as well, and there is some connectivity, or should be, maybe look across those at the same time. We're not quite as far advanced with all of those, but if you think that's helpful.
I think what we can definitely take from this discussion is that when there is, and we have these portfolio projects now in front of you with labor, but also economic, and they have interrelations among the standards in scope and then with a wider set of standards. But we will have to stage it because the labor standards will come back to you, assuming that this public consultation goes well, much earlier than the economic standards. Where there are cross sections that we need to highlight, we can definitely do that. Just wanted to point out that in the standards themselves, we will do also more work now that we have all the labor standards, that they cross-reference each other, right? That is also a very specific thing that you have across the system of the GI standards. And that is partially, I acknowledge, not fully addressing your point, Carol, that when you pick up one, then we're trying to make sure whenever there is information coming from another standard, or a particular standard is useful for application of another standard, that we reference that and make that clear.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Natalia. That then takes us to discussing the alignment of our sector standards with our revised topic standards on biodiversity, climate change, and energy.
Conclude this because we of course want to invite.
I want to say that we are planning now that planning 2 global webinars, one on the 16th of December and one in February, and we kindly invite you, GSSB members, to see if you have availability to be one of the guest speakers for this global webinar. Will be very much appreciated by the team. So just that. Thank you.
We might have some takers for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you everyone. My name is Nora Pura. I've met most of you, and for the next, hopefully not more than 20 minutes, I will be talking you through the alignment of sector standards with new and revised biodiversity, climate change, and energy standards. So this is for GSSB discussion, and hopefully by the end of the discussion we also achieve approval. So what will follow is I will go through an overview of the public consultation activities and changes introduced as a result to the drafts. I will name the key elements important for this project, which in itself was a first time that we had done this, and recommendations for future alignments as well. And the information is found in the GSSB papers, item 08 for the final drafts and item 09 for the basis for conclusions. Good. Just a very quick reminder, for the sector standards, the reporting sections list the relevant topic standards, disclosures for each sector to report. If any essential gaps for sectors are identified, additional reporting may also be developed, and that is recommended reporting for sectors. Developing sector and topic standards are a mutually reinforcing process. So the information about reporting gaps that are collected throughout the sector projects are fed back into the topic standard development, and were seen as applicable for organizations more broadly by the respective topic working groups or technical committees. These recommendations are also incorporated into the revised disclosures. And these revised disclosures upon publication then are assessed for each sector standard in the alignment phase. So coming full circle then, in many cases, the new disclosures then replace the additional recommendations originally developed as sector reporting. And this was also true for the current alignment project, in which reporting sections were significantly streamlined, with around half of the additional sector disclosures being replaced with the new revised topic standard disclosures. Again. The scope of this alignment included the existing sector standards for oil and gas, for coal, agriculture, aquaculture and fishing, as well as mining. And the topic standard disclosures, the topic standards included biodiversity, climate and energy, so 101, 102 and 103. So the effective date of GRI 101 biodiversity requires existing sector standards to incorporate these new disclosures by 1st of January 2026, which is when we aim to publish the aligned versions. GRI 102 and 103 for climate change and energy will only be effective in 2027, but the aligned publications will encourage early adoption. Quickly on the project overview, how we got to where we are. So the project follows due process, including a public consultation. However, it's not a classic standard development project, as it mainly comprises a comparison of technical contents, impacts. We did not have a technical committee or a working group, but we relied on expertise in-house from the sector and topic standards projects, who were all luckily available for consultation. And some of the experts from the topic and sector working groups and technical committees were also pulled in for individual consultations where additional views were seen as beneficial. The final drafts are then a result of this initial technical assessment, public comment period feedback, as well as additional consultations, which I will speak about in the coming slides. So we aim for approval in this meeting and leading to hopefully due process oversight committee assessment in December, so next month. A few words on the public comment period. We held it from mid-May to mid-July. We sought feedback on the relevance of the new disclosures. As you know, the scope of the topic standards was quite a lot broader than what we used to have for these topics, and whether they would replace some of the additional sector reporting included in the sector standards. Each sector also had specific questions related to additional reporting, where we saw instances that were less clear-cut, whether these were still needed or perceived as sufficiently covered by the topic standards. As for the results, we received 17 public submissions from individuals and organizations on the exposure drafts. However, several of these respondents submitted feedback to more than one standard. So if disaggregated by standard, the total feedback that we received is 32 responses, with over about 200 individual comments. Submissions were received from all 5 stakeholder constituencies, but again, when disaggregated per standard, this was not true for each of those sectors. Regional representation was not identified as a key variable for the results due to the technical focus, but as you see, we managed to reach a relatively good regional representation. But as you know, we have had an unprecedented number of consultations in the recent, let's say, year and months for both topic and sector standards projects. So we were not that surprised that this rather technical exercise didn't raise a lot of interest. But even then, we did feel that there was a need to bring in more expert views to cover the stakeholder representation where gaps were identified for each standard. So here's an overview of responses per standard. We wanted to ensure labor and civil society representation for oil and gas, as well as for coal. And for coal, we also wanted to ensure that there was at least one business representative. For mining, we sought for civil society input, and for agriculture, aquaculture, and fishing, we sought for labor and business input, and as well as civil society input on environmental issues. So we did receive a civil society submission for GRI 13, but that was specifically related to just transition, so the climate change aspects. Why we decided to go with external individual consultations is that we assessed that another public consultation would not result in better or more numerous, or at least in quality, better responses, but might rather add to the consultation fatigue that our stakeholders are currently grappling with. So instead, we decided to tap onto our existing networks, choosing experts we knew were familiar with the contents that we were seeking feedback on. So already either as former working group or technical committee members, or then reporters in the sector who have used the sector standard in their reporting process. So as a result, we conducted 8 additional consultations to address these gaps, again, with many of the experts familiar with more than one sector, and were able to several sector standards. So these consultations, we feel quite confident, bridge the constituency gaps, and we received the input that we felt was needed. And just quickly to mention the following, the organizations that we reached out to for targeted inputs. For labor, we talked with International Labour Organization as well as Industrial. For civil society, we discussed with an individual who worked in a climate-focused civil society and was involved in the development GRI 102 as well as 103, and Earthworks that was involved in GRI 11 and GRI 12, and also knows mining. For coal, we also consulted with a reporting organization that has used GRI 12 in their sustainability reports. And for agriculture, aquaculture, and fishing, a business representative from Latin America, labor representative, well, this was ILO, and civil society and mediating institutions that were involved in the development of GRI 101 biodiversity standard. And maybe we'll pause here if anyone has questions at this stage, considering that it's an unusual consultation that we undertook this time.
I do have a question, not unusual though. I was just wondering, the 200 people individual who have provided the comments, does their comments goes anywhere or consider any?
So 200 individual comments.
Yeah.
So we received 17 individuals gave comments, but when you disaggregate that in terms of feedback or input, it was 200 comments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's already, yeah.
Yes. So we weren't that popular, unfortunately. No further questions? Okay, perfect.
Have you got more to talk through, or I do have some questions, so I'm not sure whether you finished.
I will be going through the changes or non-changes,
Okay.
but I finished now with the public consultation in terms of how we conducted the process.
Okay, thank you. Charles?
Well, maybe you're gonna go through changes, but at the end, ultimately, it's a existing standard number 101 were amended, or is a new standard?
No, it is the sector standards that are aligned with the new disclosures that are included in GRI 101, 102, and 103. So the existing contents in the sector standards were assessed as per the new disclosures, because of course the existing sector standards refer to the former GRI 304 biodiversity disclosure and the disclosures related to energy and climate change that are now being superseded.
So it's including the sector 11, 12, 13, 14
Yes,
into more into the topic standards.
the other way around. So the topic standard disclosures are included in the sector standards now.
So
That's not what
effectively-
the slide, that's why I was confused. That's what I thought, but your slide 37 showed it the other way around. That's why I was just making sure. The arrow, the way it's going. It looks like you're feeding the sector standards into the topic standards, and then you revise the sector standard.
I can see how that is confusing.
That's why I thought it was a dumb question, but I don't care about dumb question. I'm just asking. But to me, I thought it was the other way around, but the graph doesn't show it this way. Yeah.
Yeah, so yes.
I think it's a process. It's a process graphic,
Indeed.
isn't it? Starting with the sector standards and updating with the topic standards and feeding them back in. But I think really what we're talking about here is minor changes to the sector standards to take account of updates to topic X standards that have been through a thorough consultation process. But we're doing this just to be cautious, to go through a proper due process.
Susanna here. Just a comment. So I very much salute the effort to bridge the constituency gap. It's very good to see that. Just two suggestions maybe. So one is I think I know the reasons for that. But it looks like a little bit of a underrepresentation of the labor side. We see that in numbers. So maybe for the future, I know that it's sometimes linked to the lack of availability of experts on the civil society labor side. That's true. But for the future, it would be really, I think, of value to strive for a bit more balance, and International Labour Organization is certainly a source of best expertise, but it's not a labor partner. So I think it's definitely the source of great knowledge, right? And yeah. So and I'm specifically looking, like at the numbers of like mediating experts. In a way, lots of consultancy is business related. So I look at these numbers in conjunction with business constituency. So I just wanted to. It's really, I really very much salute the effort and consciousness. It's not a critique. It's rather like a suggestion for the future.
Thank you. Good. Austin, you didn't have anything else? Great. Just a couple of words on the final contents and how we assessed the changes. In short, very few changes were actually made to the final drafts as compared to the exposure drafts. So, but also as the volume of the responses was on the lower side, for disclosures where feedback was received was mixed, we assessed inclusion or exclusion against the criteria here on the slide. Very short, high relevance or materiality, as well as decision usefulness of the disclosure was ranked as giving more weight for introducing or retaining a disclosure. Also, the risk of excluding a disclosure to the credibility of the standard was also regarded as adding more weight for introducing or retaining a disclosure. In many cases, feasibility concerns were raised by business members or also by mediating institutions. These were assessed against whether reasons for omission can be used and general usefulness of the information. This would apply, for example, that for certain disclosures that might be burdensome for smaller organizations, reasons for omission are always a possibility for using. And if high interoperability was identified, this would also support inclusion of the disclosure. Then, on GRI 11, the feedback that we received was generally positive on the merging of the two GHG-related topics. Some business representatives noted the broader scope of the topic standard disclosures, especially disclosures on just transition, GHG removals, as well as carbon credits, and upstream and downstream energy consumption were ones where the broader scope was noted. However, additional consultations with civil society and labor representatives opposed not including these disclosures. And given that the materiality of this information was already established in the existing GRI 11, there were additional recommendations on all of these aspects. We made the decision to retain those disclosures in GRI 11. For the sector reporting that we propose to retain, in addition to the topic standard disclosures, they were widely seen as complementary to the topic standards and not redundant. So climate-related financial risks, as well as the net CO2 removal, that adds a little bit of technical detail to the disclosure on GHG removals. So essentially, no changes were made to the reporting expectations from the exposure draft. So it remains the same. Here we don't have to go into detail. It just, here the final column just shows what the action was after the public comment period. So all of the disclosures that were proposed in the exposure draft were retained. Same goes for biodiversity. Moving on to GRI 12. Again, the disclosures from GRI 102 climate change and 102 energy listed for the coal sector in the exposure draft were seen widely as relevant for reporting. Some requirements, for example, within the 102 transition plan disclosure were identified as partly as potentially posing challenges for some coal companies. Scenario analysis was, for example, mentioned, but we know that this kind of information is commonly expected from fossil fuel companies, and as such, this will be retained. On specific questions that we asked for the coal sector, the climate-related financial risks received strong support to retain across stakeholder groups, whereas the transition plans at annual general meetings, this was a bit more mixed, but given that this is it is not covered by the transition plan disclosure and it is recommended reporting, we suggest to retain this recommendation. For the net CO2 removal, we actually received feedback that was, again, mixed, with some experts supporting the additional detail, but others, including the business representative, pointed out that it is actually not commonly done. So CO2 removal is not commonly done by upstream coal companies. It is much more prevalent for oil and gas companies, both in upstream as well as refining. So upon additional research confirming this view, we propose to remove this recommendation from GRI 12. And this will now, it will differ from GRI 11, but for the reasons just mentioned, it is seen as justifiable. Again, similar slide. So the red in the final column indicates removal of a disclosure, and everything else will be retained, also in the biodiversity standard. Then for agriculture, aquaculture, and fishing, the biodiversity disclosures were widely seen as applicable. It was mentioned by some respondents that the access and benefit sharing would not apply to all organizations, but as there are major agricultural organizations for which this disclosure is material, we will leave it in, and companies can choose those disclosures that are relevant for their operations. In terms of climate change, we included a question about just transition in the public consultation questionnaire. So again, this is a disclosure in the GRI 102 standard, but it was not as such as a concept. Just transition was not discussed within the GRI 13 standard. However, the consultations imply quite strongly that the topic is relevant, especially for larger agriculture, aquaculture, and fishing organizations that have significant climate change impacts. So public thinking about the social aspects of climate change have progressed quite dramatically in the past 5-6 years since GRI 13 was under development. And back then, just transition was mostly seen as relevant for fossil fuel industries, but this has developed in the past years. And further research really confirmed this view that it would be applicable across all sectors with significant climate change impacts. And for both mitigation and adaptation activities, we did list the disclosure under both topics on emissions as well as climate adaptation. Just a final concluding remark that excluding this disclosure could undermine the credibility of GRI 13 as a leading standard on climate change, and also taking the ILO's recommendation or guidance into account that just transition considerations are essential for all sectors. So for the climate change reporting, everything else remains the same, but just transition is introduced in both emissions as well as climate adaptation topic. And the biodiversity reporting as well as natural ecosystem conversion remain exactly as they were in the exposure. Then finally, and quickly, mining sector for this week consulted only on the climate change related topics because the new biodiversity disclosures were already incorporated in GRI 14. The disclosures were widely seen as relevant, and again, some respondents marked the more expansive requirements in the GRI 102, especially related to transition and adaptation plans and just transition. But just transition was also already identified as relevant for the mining sector in the development phase, so this will be it will be naturally retained in GRI 14. And here is the reporting section remains unchanged. There are a few additional reporting recommendations that remain, but they mostly deal with mine site reporting disaggregation. Before we move on to other changes that we are introducing as part of the alignment, would we want to stop here for any discussion, any questions on the changes that are proposed from the exposure draft?
Not from me, but it was very good to see the positive comments on GRI 101, 102 and 103 from respondents. Thank you. Anna.
Anna here, no comments, but a lot of gratitude to doing all this work. We update the topic standards, and it creates an immense amount of work to go through all the sector standards. Felipe and I were exchanging thoughts that this is a lot. Thank you for doing this work.
I get paid for it.
Yeah, I was also thinking that, and what a large amount of work it was, and wondering, is it really necessary? I'm thinking of the future. Really, do we have to do this for due process?
Yes, Felipe here. I just wanted to add it on that because we were mentioning this in the meantime, because I don't know if we even have the capacity to do that, because right now we have these 4 sector standards which contain 15 to 20 likely material topics. So each time we review a topic standard, we need to review all sector standards, and most of the topic standards are relevant to all the sectors. So if we review waste or water or biodiversity, this will impact all of them. And the more sector standards we have, this will generate more work. So now we have 4, but next year we will have textiles and yeah, so.
This, Bastian, maybe just to comment on this. So this project is also a pilot project for us to understand the dynamic. There's some underlying assumptions. One is we will not continue to update topic standards at the current rate, because right now we are updating 2/3 of our topic standards at the same time, and that is not what it will be in the future. We also believe that any update in the future of the ones that we've updated already in the last years will be more incremental, while now we're oftentimes looking at significant change in topic standards. So that should help with the exercise. But Nora will have some observations about the learnings from this exercise and schedule a session to discuss that also forward-looking, because there is a discussion coming up on the due process, and there might be modifications that we want to apply here for these type of projects that are basically dealing with the consistency of the system, but are not introducing new reporting requirement or fundamental change to the application of the standards. And maybe there's a different way of dealing with that going forward. So I just wanted to acknowledge that point. But for now, we had to go through it because the system would have become defunct as of 1st of January 26, with these things not aligned, right? We needed to actually have these things, because otherwise we run the risk that we send reporters that have a sector standard that becomes effective into a direction incorporating disclosures that are already outdated because all of you have done so much work in the last years. Yeah?
I wanted to propose what the management board actually was talking about, that digitalization can help in that automatically to be uploaded in certain templates, so organization will not be able to omit.
Well, Charles speaking. I think it was a necessary exercise because we discussed this, but given the very, sorry to say, the little changes that we have, we know that maybe it's not as necessary, or on the other hand, it could be expected that, from the reporter side of view, that they expect that. So I think we have to be very careful to say it's pilot. Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised to see they are actually quite aligned. I mean, I was concerned about those misalignment. It could be also untrue for other sectors. That's why it's tricky, right? It's a cost-benefit / pragmatic issue. Do we go through that? Because I don't know how much time you spend on it. You don't have to tell us. I know you got paid for it, but for the little, I mean, I feel kind of bad for you. That's why, yeah. So that's.
Yeah, and I think what struck me was the low number of responses, which does really raise a question about whether the exercise is worthwhile, given the minimal changes that we are talking about. A proposal could simply be made to this board, and actually the input would then be higher than you got through the PCP process.
Yeah.
Thanks. And it was actually really, I think you presented it in a very interesting way for like a lot of non-changes. But I suppose I would say that to me, the rationale has been the catch on just transition in relation to agriculture, which, to be honest, should have really been in there, because in terms of both adaptation and mitigation, we know that's something that organisations are really grappling with now, and obviously it has a huge impact on people and in the environment as well. So I think that clearly shows in a sense that the process has worked, and there'd be more credibility to that sector standard because you picked that up. But I thought what Bastian said about can we distill down some of the learning and then in a way kind of like be very much aware of this for our own future thinking in terms of the GSSB as well, and the development of the topic standards is a good idea, but thank you.
So we will record that as an action, that we have a download of the learnings now, but we will come back also with how we want to deal with this in the future. Not instantly, that will take a bit, but we will look at that.
Can I ask then, these changes will be made to the standards. Will they then be effective immediately, these sector standard changes? January. Oh,
Yes, exactly. So we will make these standards available by the 1st of January 2026. So for biodiversity reporting, that will be effective immediately. But for climate change related topics, companies still have a year transition period before they need to report.
so the changes to the sector standards become effective at the same time as the relevant changes to the topic standards?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, just what's the black line version, by the way?
Essentially the changes. So what the previous content will be crossed over and the new content will be visible. I think that's the term, but I may be using it the wrong term.
Never heard it.
The track changes version.
Okay, okay.
The clean.
Yeah.
Hi, Rebecca. I have two questions. How often are we expecting to do this alignment revision? And the other question is, on the responding institution, is there any overlap with institutions that usually respond to our consultations?
On the second question, there was quite a lot of overlap with the organizations that usually respond with, for example, the oil and gas respondents, some of them even being part of our working group in the development phase. Would you like to take the other?
So Helga Ambitrago, so this alignment exercise is done every time we have a new or revised topic standard. The next round of topic standards are the labor standards. So whenever they are approved, we will then need to trigger one of these alignment. I would hope that we can do that also with any of the economic standards that are going to be approved, and if pollution is ready, so that we do once a revision of all the sector standards against the new revised topics. So it would be basically 2027.
Unless before then we can get agreement to change the approach. To make it so that we just discuss it.
So we would need to, in any case, we would need to have an approved topic standard. So before that, we wouldn't start, although at this point we can start to see the differences now with the exposure drafts and what we have now. And that is a conversation that already takes place. You also, Chalendra, asked a question about the disclosures we have in textiles, how they align with the labor rights in supply chains, in business relationships. So it's a conversation that takes place and is then materialized in the final standards.
Okay, thank you. So is there an approval slide? Are we approving this?
Yes. Maybe I'll just, in 5 minutes, run through all the other changes. So essentially, we had to make minor changes as a result of the alignment. So on standard naming and history table, topic statements and numbering, disclosure titles, and then minor changes to the glossary and bibliography, which I will not go into any detail, but I'll talk through the first three very quickly. So as this represents a new version of the original standard, we suggest to not actually change the name of the standard. So we would stick to, for example, GRI 11, Oil and Gas Sector 2029, but add in parentheses, for example, the version number. So it would be version 1.1, and we would include a history of updates table at the beginning of the sector standard. And there would be a high-level overview of the changes that have been introduced to this version. And whenever a new alignment would take place, these alignments would be added to this same table. For the topic statements and numbering, because we aligned with the topic boundary of climate change and merged two topics in three of the sector standards, this means that there is a change in the number of topics and numbering of the topics in the sector standards. As we started to assess the impact of updating all of the topic numbers, we came to the conclusion that it is actually better to just remove one topic number and keep all the rest of the topics with the same number, so we don't have to update every single product and service that we have that include examples of topics in the sector standards. And we also developed a new topic statement for the topic climate change, which essentially merges the topic statements of the previous two topics and aligns with the terminology and language of the climate change topic standard. So on the disclosure titles, you may remember that as part of the sector program review that we conducted in 2024, the team proposed to introduce titles for additional sector disclosures. As you know, these can be quite essential for determining a sector's impacts, but unfortunately, as they're recommended reporting, they are quite often organizations. So with the titles, we aim to bring more visibility to the additional sector disclosures by introducing sector-tailored content indexes, which would be then published along with these aligned sector standards, and including the additional sector disclosures with these titles into the index itself. So they will be, reporters will literally face the reporting in their content indexes should they decide to use the tailored ones. So it's not a change in the standard per se. The disclosures remain recommendations. It's just adding concise titles for them. And then we can move on to any further discussion and or approval.
Hi, Rebecca. Another few questions. Can you give us a flavor of how difficult it was to choose new titles, or it wasn't? Then, is there overlap between some of them? So, for example, how will companies know where to stop and where to end? If I look at free, prior, and informed consent versus operations where indigenous people may be affected, are we providing guidelines, see where one ends and the other one starts? For example, an overlap, some infographics, as you were mentioning earlier. And are we planning, or do we need some training materials and sessions based on this alignment work for reporters? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll address the overlap first. So we're not removing anything. So we're retaining the quote unquote guidance that's already in the sector standards, but we're only essentially giving them a title that's easy for reporters to use in their own content index, and that we will also use in the tailored content indexes, because they're sometimes quite large chunks of text which are very inconvenient to put into a content index. So this helps reporters also streamline their content indexes. With regards to training, we are in discussion with our academy team. So whether there are any updates that are needed in the sector standard courses, especially related to the topics that are now being merged, because the topics don't exist anymore with the same names that they used to. On new titles, Steve, do you want to say something? Because we got a lot of help from the editorial team, of course. Laura and Steve, maybe.
Yeah, Steve Gilman, senior editor. Yeah, so I'd say it was quite smooth developing the titles. The request came from our reporting services team, who thought titles would help with reporters' content index. So we then used Nora's work to identify where there was a need for a title, and our team prepared a draft and sent it to the sector team and the technical team for their input. And then based on that input, we finalized it and put it into the document that went to the GSSB. So it was overall quite smooth.
Helga, and regarding the bringing this to the market, as we are issuing these new tailored content indexes, we're working with the reporting services team to make a communication about it and perhaps a webinar, so we can use the opportunity of how you can use this new tailored content indexes and inform then the stakeholders about the changes.
Okay, thank you all very much for that discussion. Helga, quick one. I mean, sorry, Galia.
Gala here. For slide 58, just a small remark that organizations contribute to climate change not only with non-renewable energy consumption, because for agricultural sector, land use change, fertilizers are not non-renewable energy consumption. It is a different activity contributes.
For the agriculture sector, the topic statements actually remain unchanged, because we did not because the boundaries were different. So for agriculture, the boundary includes other emissions to air. So this topic statement will actually not be included in GRI 13, only in the extractive sector standards, as well as further sectors where a similar combination topic is being.
There is a land use change.
Land use change.
And in mining, you have land use change if you build it in certain area. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Just briefly on that topic, on balance though, I believe most companies have the largest percentage of their climate impact coming from the combustion of fossil fuels. So the phrasing, particularly through non-renewable energy consumption, I think still would hold true, but certainly in the agricultural sector, those non-fuel emissions can dominate. I think that's what they mean by particularly, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If we could move on to the approval required, please. So we're asked to approve the sector standards alignment with the new and revised topic standards. Can we approve that?
Yes.
Yes, again, that is unanimous. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Nora.
Thank you. Yes, two more slides. Timeline is very straightforward. Very straightforward. We went through all of this. The only thing that is worth mentioning is that because we're seeking for DPOC, Due Process Oversight Committee approval in December, mid-December, we will need to approve the minutes of this meeting virtually, which might need to take place already next week. So just a heads up. Then finally, a few recommendations for the future. So the major benefit this time that we had was not only the limited scope that was already pointed out, that we only had four sector standards and only 3 topic standards, but also that we had access to all of the technical staff that were involved in developing these sector standards as well as the topic standards. So this will not be the case anymore in the future. The complexity will increase. So we have a few recommendations, not only for the alignment project, but also for sector projects as well as topic projects. So first of all, to ensure the technical expertise of and understanding of the topic standard contents and their relevance to sectors, we suggest that all of the sector standards projects make efforts to internally document decisions of inclusion or exclusion of certain, because there will be deliberations of both topic standard disclosures, but also additional sector reporting, so that there is transparent trail to be followed by whoever is conducting the alignment project in the future. It would also be good to bring even very preliminary topic standard contents in front of ongoing sector standard projects. And I know that this has been done already in the financial services project to get initial assessment by the technical committees or working groups of these sectors. So this will, of course, facilitate the future assessment. We would also encourage topic standards projects to develop detailed mappings of old contents versus new contents for the use of the alignment team. And in addition, ideally, the existing topic standard working groups and technical committees would already give their views at the end of the project of the disclosures applicability for the sectors for which we have sector standards. So this would all contribute to an easier start and a better kind of assessment, a robust expert assessment at the beginning of the project. And then this would also help out with the public consultation. So now this time we conducted a wider public consultation asking feedback essentially about we proposed, and it was left quite open. But maybe in the future, it would be better to ask very specific questions on especially new disclosures like just transition this time, or something that is very unclear or contested. So I would recommend to keep it quite tight, the scope of the public consultation, which will then help with time and resources in the processing phase. That's it.
Thank you, it's Charles again. So I know I said that you don't have to tell us how much time you spent on these 4, but I'm still going to ask because now I just thought about the labor standard we're just doing exposure draft. So labor will go to almost every sector, right? Right? I mean, so then the scope of this work is actually, I'm resuscitating the debate of to do it or not, but labor, it's all sectors, right? So I don't know in terms of your workload and time, but the resource that we have, I don't know how much. Yeah, so can you say how much time did you spend on this? More directly, yeah.
Yes, I started the work in December last year. I was probably putting something like 60–70% of my time into it until September.
Wow. So 6 months basically.
More.
Well, no, 9 months.
60%
Or
of
9
9,
months, yeah. For four sectors.
Just for minor updates.
To confirm, no change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this clearly isn't sustainable, and we need to find another way of doing it. Mr. Buck.
So I think just as an action, we can note that we will bring this back for discussion in context of the due process review, but also we will reflect on how this can be done. But essentially, I think at the very heart of it, we will still have to update the system that because there's this consistency across what we offer is of very high importance when you talk about reporting burden, uptake of the standards and all. But there are all kinds of learnings that from this also, I think, one level down on the more operational level that we will take forward, and points that were made, for example, around moving into more digital publishing that could also help with this. So working with systems where these overlaps between existing standards and standards that are in development can be more readily addressed. That is also part of the infrastructure investment that GI needs to make. Yeah. Does that conclude the remarks from the GSB? Because otherwise I have just one more.
Maybe,
there is one. Yeah.
No, just an additional minor comment. That this is a lot of work, not only for you, but also for the organizations using the standards, because they may have contributed to this public consultation period this time, but if you open a new public consultation period next year or the year after, at some point they will stop contributing to the process. So I don't know if we also have the capacity to engage with the main actors every time we launch a PCP.
Yes, just wanted to say that this session was the last contribution of Nora to a public meeting of the GSB, because Nora has decided to move on and she will leave us. I don't.
Because of this.
No, it's there are much better reasons. On an institutional level, I have to say, unfortunately, she's leaving us. On a personal level, I have to congratulate her of making a bold move. She will work in a related but different sector going forward, and she has decided to pursue studies first and then move on. I mean, what she presented today and all the diligence that went into the work, I think is testament for what she brought to GI. There is much more that she brought. She was a highly valued colleague. We would have liked to keep her in the team for sure. And because Nora joined the team when we started to conceptualize the sector pilot. She was a core part of almost all the sector projects to date. And now she has actually made it full circle by also bringing it back into the system. And I think it speaks to her commitment because she decided over summer that she's moving on, but then she actually offered to stay on and complete that project. She is full-time busy with something else, actually, but she tagged on time for us to complete this, and she brought this to a successful close today. So just wanted to, on behalf of GI, also thank Nora for all of this. You will be missed, and yeah, we will be watching closely what you do next, and all best of luck with that. Thank you.
We have a short break now, back at 1:15 the hour, please.
Recording stopped.